I'm the associate editor of AAST's A to Z magazine. In this edition of Sleep Spindles, I will be chatting with our AAST board members, Bretton Heavener and Michael Eden, and we will be talking about our monthly musing questions, which are questions we pose to the AAST membership via social media, covering a wide range of topics. So we're going to be covering a lot of different things, so try to stay with us. Thank you so much for joining me today, you guys. So our AAST monthly musings are ways we can engage people about hot topics. So we tried kind of pick some of the hottest topics to chat about today. We're going to start out with something a little controversial, alcohol during sleep studies. A lot of people have been asking us, should we allow people to drink alcohol before a sleep study? How do you guys feel about that?
Do you want to take the lead?
In the sleep lab, I think the hardest part about it is having an inebriated person and an employee at the same place. So that's always a concern for us. That's probably the larger one, is allowing alcohol on the premise, more from a business perspective. From a scientific perspective, I mean, this is what's happening at home, and so letting them have alcohol is I think a reasonable thing to do. So
I agree with that, what Bretton has said. I think that there's so many factors that affect the quality of the sleep that we get in a sleep clinic already. To add another deterrent for people coming into the clinic would just to be to our disadvantage. So I think that allowing people to maintain their home routines in the sleep clinic is important. But as Bretton mentioned, it is very lab specific depending on the director of the lab, whether they're allowed to bring the alcohol with them. And we would make sure that the person didn't drive into the clinic or has a ride to pick them up in the morning.
That's a good point.
the other thing is we always have to make sure that we document. So we just really need that information either given to us from the patient or from the technologist that sort of describes, so that when we look at everything or interpret it later on, we do know that that was a factor that was influenced.
And I know we've chatted about this before, but medical marijuana, you're from Canada.
Yes.
In Canada, it's recreational for the entire country?
Yes,
Is that correct?
it's available through prescription, through any type of a medical marijuana supplier.
Yeah.
So we have had, in recent months, a lot of people coming into the sleep clinic with their medical marijuana, and we allow them to use it as per they would at home as well. So I think that the challenge as well is that we do need to know the dosage that they're using and to document, as Bretton mentioned, so that we can have a valid and reliable test.
And I mean, as an American counterpart, do you think is that a concern that you guys have been talking about in the sleep lab, like with more marijuana users coming out in the open, I guess to say?
Well, I'm from California. I think you will see, different issues in different states. But no matter what, when people get home at the end of the day, what we need to do is talk about how are we going to treat them.
Right.
So one of the big things that we need to look at are, does a CPAP machine, for example, auto-titrate? Do their prescriptions need to be increased because they use more alcohol at home, in that way to just, if they have insomnia or are taking other medications, is there going to be influences in those types of situations? So I think it's a much bigger conversation, but it is there and we're going to have to deal with it.
Very cool.
I think along those lines as well, the person analyzing the study, because we're inundated with sleep studies, a lot of times external scoring sources are used. I think that documentation is key in order to analyze and stage the sleep study accordingly if they have been utilizing medical marijuana, because it can have an effect on the sleep onset particularly.
Definitely. Great. That was enlightening. Our next question is, to you personally, what does professionalism look like in the field? I know typically when we think of professionalism, we think of a guy getting a suit and tie with his briefcase, going to work, something like that. I think most people think of it like that. But how does it kind of manifest itself specific to sleep care professionals?
Yeah. Well, I think when I think of professionalism, the first thing is that you're not an amateur. So it really is a skill set. Really being able to distinguish yourself that you know a lot, you have the skill to deal with complex sleep-related situations across the across the gamut of sleep disorders. So that's the first part. But then not only do you have that skill set, but you have the confidence and the experience to be able to make the decisions that need to be made while that person's underneath your care. And then under both of those, the skill and the confidence, you need to have the respect, the empathy that goes along with it as well. And if you can kind of combine all of that in some sort of way.
I think to go along with that as well, you have to consider the medical legal issues. We're dealing with patients at the most vulnerable point. If you have a different type of a situation where you're a banker and a client, the professionalism is implied, whereas with the sleep clinic, we're seeing people in their pajamas, first of all. We're dealing with them when they're sleeping, they're vulnerable. So a lot of things can be mistaken if you don't keep that professionalism. And patients want to spew information to us that we necessarily shouldn't be receiving, but you just take that with a grain of salt and you just keep everything professional so that you can give the best care and keep things in a legal perspective as well.
Our next question is, how are your relationships with your DMEs?
Yeah. Well, I'll start this one off. I am a DME, so it's great.
You have a great relationship.
It's wonderful. But, I also run sleep clinics, run sleep labs, et cetera. And, what we're looking at in sleep industry right now is just silos of care. And so that's what we're talking about. We need to build those things up. I think one of the biggest problems with DME is that it's durable medical equipment. That means that CPAP and respiratory equipment, which requires quite a bit of service to get people compliant and helped, is bulked into the same category as bent metal, like wheelchairs, walkers, et cetera. And they're very, very different. And so you have companies who they're not just supplying CPAPs, they're supplying everything across the board, beds, toilets, everything. And so when you do that, sometimes you lack the specialty or the skill set, the professionalism, the sleep professionalism, I guess, to go back to that question, that's associated. And so we need to embrace the DMEs, and we need to start to explain to them that when they are providing CPAP, they need to have a different level of skill and help them get there. But
From my perspective, being from Canada, we have a different perspective than the Americans do, whereas the relationship is pretty much completely separate. You have your sleep clinic, and then you have your DME or home care provider that we have in Ontario. I think that the relationship could be stronger where we have kind of a melting pot of services with education, with adherence, compliance, and those type of issues. I think that in the past, where we had the two separate, there was a very strong likelihood of people falling through the cracks because the sleep clinic would do their job diagnosing the sleep disorder, send the patient off to the DME, and then the patient would see the DME and take care of their sleep disorder with the DME, and never the two shall talk ever again. I think that in the near future, you're going to see more and more aspects of trying to bring these two companies together to try to provide a better service for the patient, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what both facets have in common, is that they want the best care for their patients.
Right.
I think that where we try to provide a better relationship with the DME is we have a reciprocal education process in Ontario where we have the DME will come in and do in-services for our staff so that they have better information of the new masks, the new machines, how to titrate. And then we also have the DME staff come in and see what it's like for the patient to have an overnight sleep study, or to come in and see how to analyze a sleep study, so that they know the nuances of each other's business. So I think that if you have a better understanding of what the other person does, you can provide better care for your patient. And I think that the reciprocal education is key.
it's great.
And our last question is, what would you say is your percentage of tests that you're doing at home tests? And how have you seen that change over the last several years?
Okay. The other company that I run, other than the DME, is a home sleep testing company. And so we do 100% home sleep testing. All in-lab studies are referred out to local sleep centers where those are handled. So we're at 100%. It's different as I look across the country, the United States. There's more and more home sleep tests being done all the time due to insurance requirements of pre-authorization. So there's definitely an increase in that. And California, where we are, actually has quite a bit of HMOs that are requiring pre-auth and home sleep test first.
Interesting.
Okay. In Canada, it's a different ball of wax. Depends which province that you're in. In Ontario, there's probably 1 to 2% home sleep testing. 98% of tests are done in lab, and the reason is that there's no funding for home sleep testing currently in Ontario. In other provinces where they don't have as many sleep clinics, it's more popular. In Alberta, they probably do 70 to 80%, upwards of 90%, depending which part of Alberta you're in. BC has more sleep clinics, so they do less home sleep testing. But in general, in Canada, the home sleep test is still a new field of technology. We probably will investigate increasing the funding for home sleep testing and following our American counterparts in the future, but right now, level 1 testing is still the number 1 testing in Canada.
Interesting. Now, obviously, as someone that does 100% home sleep tests, have you found that in the past several years, more and more people are seeking it out, whether it's for an insurance option or whether it's for like a personal preference to be at their home during the sleep test?
Yes, I think the important thing is we're home sleep testing. What we're really looking at specifically is sleep apnea. We're not looking at the gamut of other sleep disorders, et cetera. So there are screening tools that primary care physicians and sleep specialists are using to specifically say this patient should head towards a home sleep test first. It's being directed, like I said, by insurance companies because it is a more affordable option. But patients do ask to do it in their home as well, rather than staying in the sleep lab. So,
Well, thank you so much, Breton and Michael, for joining us and discussing some of the hot topics going on in the sleep community today. And thank you for joining us on our edition of Sleep Spindles. Be sure to check out our other videos on our YouTube channel.